Hi, fifth graders. Today we're going to start talking about dividing decimal numbers. And the page that's up on your screen might look a little familiar to you. That's because when we kicked off our unit on multiplying decimals, we talked about how we could use mental math to solve multiplication and division problems by finding a pattern. So we talked about how we could use whole number powers of 10 or decimal powers of 10, like 1/10, 1/100th, 1/1000th, and so on. So you can see that I've put up again multiplying by whole number powers of 10, which we know shifts the decimal point to the right because our product gets greater. I've put up multiplying by decimal powers of 10, which shift the decimal points to the left because our answer becomes a lesser number. And now we're going to talk about dividing by whole number powers of 10. This year in fifth grade, you are only going to be responsible for going in that one direction. So we're only going to talk about dividing by whole number powers of 10. And I'd like to use that number 24 again. So you know that 24 divided by 10 to the 0 power is like saying 24 divided by 1, which is still 24. And now when I move on to the second example in that pattern, 24 divided by 10 to the first, that's like saying 24 divided by 10. Well, you can kind of figure out and reason through that if I'm dividing 24 by 10, my answer is going to become less. So if I have my decimal point at the end of my whole number, I know from my multiplying rules that when my answer becomes less, I need to shift the decimal point to the left. So we're going to find that dividing by whole number powers of 10 is exactly the same as multiplying by a decimal power of 10. In other words, if I'm dividing by 10 to the first, or the standard form 10, I need to shift that decimal point one place value position to the left, giving me a final answer of 2 and 4/10. And that makes sense because if I were to divide 20 by 10, I would end up with 2. So dividing 24 by 10 makes sense that my answer will be a little bit more than 2. Let's divide 24 by 10 to the second. 10 to the second is 100. Since that exponent is 2, or the power of 10 has two zeros, I need to move the decimal point 2 spaces to the left. And remember, I can put a placeholder 0 out front just so that I know that that's 0 and 24 hundredths. And finally, in 24 divided by 10 to the third, I have the exponent of 3, or the standard form 1000, which has three zeros. So I'll shift my decimal point 1, 2, 3 spaces to the left and fill in my placeholder zeros, so my final answer is 0 and 24 thousandths. So again, since our quotient is getting smaller, we're moving the decimal point to the left, the same number of spaces as we have zeros or as our exponent tells us. So let's take a look at one story problem of how you'll see dividing by whole number powers of 10. You might see an example like this. The Healthy Wheat Bakery uses 560 pounds of flour to make 1,000 loaves of bread. Each loaf contains the same amount of flour. How many pounds of flour does the bakery use in each loaf of bread? Okay, so I can tell that this question is all about a bakery, and I can picture the loaves of bread already made fresh out of the oven, and I can picture the bags of flour that they used all ready to be set for the next day. So now let's go line by line. The first sentence says the Healthy Wheat Bakery uses 560 pounds of flour to make 1,000 loaves of bread. So I'm picturing a giant bag of flour that's going to be our 560 pounds and a bunch of different loaves of bread. So all 560 of those pounds make 1,000 loaves. The second sentence tells me each loaf contains the same amount of flour. Now I do have some math information here when it tells me that it's the same amount. If each loaf has the same amount, that means I'm making equal groups. This is how I know I'm dividing because I am going to be sharing or splitting apart this 560 pounds into 1,000 equal groups for the 1,000 loaves. So finally, the question sentence asks, how many pounds of flour does the bakery use in each loaf of bread? So since I'm splitting apart the flour into 1,000 groups, I'll divide 560 by 1,000. I can see that I have a power of 10 with 3 zeros. That means I'll shift my decimal point 3 place value positions to the left because I know that I'm going to end up with a lesser number. So I'll go 1, 2, 3 spaces, which means that each loaf of bread has the same as 0 and 560 thousandths pounds of flour. So that's how you'll use powers of 10 in word problems where you have to divide. Thanks for watching.